welcome back to part 2 of our trip from London, England to Reykjavik, Iceland. In part 2, we will be visiting Dublin, Ireland, Belfast in Northern Ireland, and then on to Scotland, where we will stop in Greenock and Oban before continuing on to Iceland. For Dublin, our ship anchored just outside the Dún Laoghaire harbor. After tendering in, we hopped on our bus and headed off to Dublin. Our excursion for today was called Dublin City Sights and St. Patrick's Cathedral. St. Patrick's Cathedral was built in 1191 and is considered a Gothic style of architecture. The spectacular interior of the cathedral is part church, part museum, even including retired Irish regimental flags who fought and died as part of those retired regiments. This is called the Door of Reconciliation. When one of two feuding families, the Butlers, took sanctuary in the church, when the Butlers refused to open and parley, the leader of the Kildares ordered a hole cut in the door through which he extended the hand of peace. Once one of the most fashionable addresses in the city, these are the homes of Merrion Square. Construction of these homes began in 1762 and continued for 30 years. The homes surround three sides of Merrion Square Park, and until the 70s remained a private park for the people living in those homes. Now those homes are given over to offices for doctors, lawyers, and the such, and the land was returned to the city for use as a public park in 1974. The park contains several statues, with one of those being one of Merrion Park's most famous residents during its heyday, Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was one of Ireland's most famous playwrights, poets, authors, and satirists. Example: there is only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about. The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Being natural is simply a pose. While the area where Dublin stands today has been inhabited by humans since prehistoric times, and artifacts have been found dating back 6,000 years ago. The first known settlement was established by the Gaelic people in the 7th century. The Gaels were replaced by a Viking settlement, and then by the 12th century, Dublin had become Ireland's principal settlement. Now numbering about 1.263 million people, there are 772 pubs to serve that population. After an enjoyable day in Dublin, it was time to hop aboard our bus and back to the port of Dún Laoghaire, where it was time for our tender ride back to the ship. The Silver Moon's tender service was always done well and was relatively comfortable. The tender services were efficient and effective, some of which can be chalked up to the fact that the Silver Moon holds just 596 guests. And when running the tender service, two tenders were always in action, one crossing the path of the other about midway between the ship and the dock. Upon returning to the ship, the wife and I decided to go up to Deck 11 and try the pool grill for lunch. As in most pool grills on most cruise ships, The Pool Grill specializes in hot dogs, hamburgers, sandwiches, and the like, and a limited dessert menu. This is a mango eton mess, and the idea is to take the back of your spoon, smash it up, and mix it up into a mess before eating. After messing about a bit and watching our sail away from Dunleary, we went back to our suite and got ready for, well, you guessed it, dinner. And dinner tonight would be in Kaiseki. Kaiseki is one of the 2 restaurants on Silver Moon that has an upcharge in the evenings. That upcharge is $40 per person at this time, and the food is presented in an elegant Japanese style, but certainly shows influences from all around Asia. The food in the evenings is much more elaborate than the daytime fare and features things like Wagyu beef with a lobster tail and miso black cod or sable fish. For more on Kaiseki and all the other restaurants on Silver Moon, check out the dining guide in part 5 of this series. The next morning, and we were in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is the 4th country making up the United Kingdom. It is the capital of and the largest city in Northern Ireland, with a population of about 670,000 in the greater metropolitan area. By the early 19th century, Belfast was a major port and played an important role in the Industrial Revolution. This morning we had breakfast at Atlantide. Atlantide offers a sit-down a la carte option to the La Terraza buffet for breakfast and lunch. More on those options in part 5 of this 5-part series. Our excursion for today took us not into Belfast, but to the royal residence at Hillsborough Castle. Currently, the house is the royal residence for the British royals when working or visiting Northern Ireland. In fact, we had just missed Prince William, who was in residence only the night before. In recent years, Hillsborough has also served as a meeting space for small, intimate gatherings of world leaders. Now, the best thing about Hillsborough are the more than 100 acres of gardens on the property. Ranging from formal to informal gardens to actual vegetable gardens, they were, at least to me, the highlight of the tour. Now, strictly speaking, Hillsborough Castle is not a castle at all. It is an 18th century Georgian country house built by the Hill family. In 1922, the Marquis of Downshire sold the house and grounds to the British government, who used it to house the governor of Northern Ireland until 1973. Today, in addition to being the official royal residence for British royals, it is the official residence for the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Here are some of the royal herbs and veggies. And here's some nice royal lettuce with which to make the royal salad. Don't forget the royal thyme to go into the royal salad dressing. Interestingly, The home and the gardens were built when pineapples were considered a very exotic and almost unobtainable fruit. Built on the grounds of the gardens were several low-slung buildings, now being restored, where the tropical climate and the extended growing time necessary for pineapples was recreated. Tonight, dinner was on Deck 11 at the Pool Grill as it transforms into the venue, Hot Rocks. Hot Rocks is kind of a unique do-it-yourself sort of dining experience where each diner is brought a chunk of lava stone, is brought preheated to a whopping 750 degrees Fahrenheit or 400 degrees Celsius, where you cook the protein of your choice yourself. The menu is substantial and varied enough that you can go back to the grill, Hot Rocks, several times and try something different each time. The choices range from a Berkshire pork chop to several cuts of beef and a cornucopia of seafood. While a carnivore's delight, there are still a few choices for vegetarians, consisting of vegetable skewers and salads. For more in-depth coverage of the Pool Grill and Hot Rocks, check out Part 5 of this 5-part series. While at the grill, we were treated to this beautiful rainbow stretching over Belfast while listening to our favorite performing artist on Silversea Silver Moon, Alan. Our next port of call was Greenock, Scotland. Greenock is located on the River Clyde, where it opens into the deeper waters of the Firth of Clyde. Greenock is just down the road from the port and city of Glasgow, Scotland. But we were not destined to visit the city of Greenock or Glasgow. Instead, as the pipes welcomed us to Greenock, we hopped on a bus and headed off to tour the Glengoyne Scotch distillery. After about a 1-hour bus trip through the stunningly green, bucolic Scottish countryside, we arrived at Glengoyne. True to form, we arrived at Glengoyne during what they call the quiet time. This is a time when almost everything is shut down for cleaning and maintenance. Because it was the quiet time, we would be unable to tour the distillery itself or even the warehouses. Glengoyne Scotch is unusual in the aspect that it is distilled in the highlands and matured in the lowlands. Barrels used to mature Glengoyne whiskey are also a bit unusual in that they are primarily American or Spanish oak sherry cask with a smattering of American oak bourbon barrels. Officially founded in 1833, it is likely that they were part of a group of bootleggers operating in the hills and valleys surrounding the location of the distillery where it stands now. After doing an abbreviated tour of the property, we headed off to the tasting room. In the tasting room, they had set up tastings with a 10-year and their 12-year single malt scotch. After a quick lecture on the way Glengoyne is made and the nosing notes and tasting notes we should be looking for, we got down to it. I liked the Glengoyne Scotch as it is not a peated Scotch and the flavors were light and somewhat fruity. From the tasting room, we went into the store where I spotted the bottle that I wanted, and although I begged and I pleaded, my wife said 22,500 pounds or $28,653 was too much. Now our friends George and Allison are collectors of Scotch, so I was a bit surprised when he purchased 2 bottles that were filled from this barrel labeled bourbon. Regardless, here is Allison filling one of those bottles. I have sped up the video by a good bit, but you should still get the idea. I'm assuming that even though this is Scotland, they modeled this bourbon after the American rules for bourbon that say at least 51% of the mash bill must be corn. There are plenty of other bottles available, but I found the cask outside was much more convenient and a whole lot less expensive than 22,500 pounds. With our distillery tour finished, we hopped back on the bus and headed off to Lake Lomond for a brief, very brief stop. Returning to Greenock in our bonny ship, the Silver Moon, I took some time to dump today's video onto the hard drive of the computer, and then we got ready for dinner. Pre-dinner drinks today were again in the salt bar, and as before, the drinks were all very well crafted and tasty. Dinner tonight was once more in Atlantide.
The spider crab and shrimp.
And once again, Atlantide scored high for the quality and variety of the dishes. Please check out part 5 for our full restaurant and dining guide, as well as a complete tour of the Silver Moon. After dinner, we went out carousing a bit and then prepare for our next stop, Oban, Scotland. Oban, a small town of about 8,000 people and located on the Firth of Lorne, is known as the gateway to the Isles and sometimes the seafood capital of the world. Stepping off the tender, we were once again greeted by a piper, this time a bonny lass. During the summer tourist season, the small town of Oban swells to about 24,000 people who come for the rugged beauty of the surrounding countryside and easy access to the Scottish Isles. The modern city of Oban grew up around the Oban distillery that was established in 1794, still producing whiskey today. You might be wondering how a city of only 8,000 inhabitants can accommodate another 16,000 residents every day during the tourist season. You will note that almost every large house is a guest house, bed and breakfast, or even a hotel. As you continue to look around, you'll see that there are seafood restaurants of one sort or another on almost every street corner, reminiscent of Starbucks here in the United States. Of course, there are other restaurants like this authentic Italian pizza made in Scotland, right next to Pew Pew Perfect Fried Chicken, among others. The architecture and homes of Oban have a sturdiness about them, as well as an interesting architectural style. On our way to our first stop of interest, a local landmark known as McCaig's Tower, sometimes called by tourists but never by the locals as McCaig's Folly. John Stuart McCaig was a local philanthropic banker who commissioned in 1897 the building of this structure based on his admiration of the Colosseum in Rome. The structure is 200 meters across and has a nice overlook looking out on the city of Oban. Mr. McKegg commissioned the structure for £5,000 in 1896, roughly equivalent to £831,000 today, to keep local stonemasons busy during hard times. Unfortunately, with his death in 1902, work stopped and the project was abandoned. Returning to Oban, we found the only place on Earth where you can probably get Avengers tea towels directly across the street from our next stop, St. John's Cathedral. St. John's Cathedral is a Scottish Episcopal church that was begun in 1846 and completed in 1864. Funds ran out before the project could be fully completed, with the steel buttressing system being added to safely hold up the grand structure of the cathedral. You can see the tower of a small Scottish castle or a Scottish baronial house poking out of the landscape next to the firth. Companions went up to the pool grill for lunch. We opted for kaiseki once more. And interestingly, we were the only people in kaiseki. Today, we opted for soba noodle bowls. And a bit of sashimi. For dessert, we decided to check out the afternoon selection at the Arts Cafe. And we both ended up with a parfait, a cookie, and a view of the firth. As the last shuttle of the day was headed into Oban for its final pickup, we got ready for dinner. And dinner tonight would be at La Dame. La Dame is the onboard French restaurant and one of the two restaurants, along with kaiseki, that carry a cover charge. On the Silver Moon, that cover charge was $80 per person. From escargot to foie gras to vichyssoise, the food was superbly prepared and presented. The delicious entrees, including this duck breast and this Dover sole, along with everything else brought to the table, were delicious and a hit with our crowd. Everyone at the table was of the opinion that the quality of the food and service was well worth the $80 per head cover charge. bummer is when we found out that our favorite dessert from La Dame, the Grand Marnier souffle, had been replaced with some kind of chocolate souffle, which, while good, was nowhere near as good as a Grand Marnier souffle. Oh well, c'est la vie.
Oh, this is chocolate. I don't want it.
Thank you for watching part 2 of our 5-part series on London, England to Reykjavik, Iceland. Please like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. If you have the time and the interest, please consider watching a few of our other videos. And watch for part 3 as we continue our journey with 4 stops in Iceland. Comments and suggestions are always welcome, and we wish you safe and happy travels.